Nigel, you recently posted an article on various social media platforms which was discussing about data as the new currency of businesses. Can you just share with us a little bit more about, just how much data is actually out there?
Yeah, absolutely, Sean. So I think there is nearly as many statistics about data as there is data. Our friends at IBM kind of estimate that there's around 2.5 quintillion bytes worth of data created every single day. And that's statistics from a couple of years ago. So I think the estimate is that's probably nearer 3 quintillion by now. But that in itself, quintillion as a word is kind of like a hard to kind of conjure up in your mind. So that's roughly equivalent to the neurons in 250 million human brains worth of data that's being created every day. So kind of a lot of data. And if you look at the data that, on the internet and in the world that we've kind of created today, that estimate is around 44 zettabytes worth of data. And again, zettabyte is kind of one of those words that has more recently been introduced into the dictionary because, when we started creating data, we didn't ever think that we create as much data as we are today. And for, again, for reference, that's roughly 44 trillion gigabytes worth of data in the world. And the estimate is that every couple of years, that amount of data is doubling. So we're creating more and more data. But of that data, we're not storing all of it. A lot of it becomes, what we would call data exhaust. And that would, be things from kind of like our social media feeds, things like Zoom calls like we're on now, where the data doesn't actually get stored. But what we do store, most of it actually gets archived before we get any useful value from it. And then that leaves the data that's kind of left. And then what's left, obviously needs, as we've talked about before, tidy up and to kind of get sorted before we can kind of make use of it. But data and the amounts of data is kind of really important because data is the food for artificial intelligence. And kind of more specifically, it gets used by neural networks. And that's things like image recognition and voice recognition. And we can see over the kind of last few years the progress that's been made in those areas as the neural networks become more performant with more data that's kind of fed into them. But data is a kind of good thing, and we talk about it as currency, but actually it has its issues as well. And one of the estimates is that by 2030, that actually our storage of data will take up 8% of the world's electrical supply. So we'll be using 8% of our electricity just to store the data that we're creating. And obviously there are the other things that we see in the kind of press around kind of the privacy of kind of data and the regulations that we need to kind of help with that, bias. And then there's the challenge of just storing the data itself. As I say, much of it we don't store. But even if we tried to, we're starting to kind of run out of storage capacity to store the large amounts of data that we're creating.